straight into the Wallabies? What gives you confidence that he can potentially do the job despite not playing?
Yeah, I think having had a couple of discussions with Joseph, having had him at the hub in Canberra last week, you know, he's a kid who works hard on his game and very quick to pick things up. I think the other part of it is that we just want to make sure that we give him the best runway possible to try to get involved in the Wallabies. So he could have gone with Saibi and we would have been pretty comfortable with that, and we talked about that as an option to get a little bit of game time before stepping up to the Wallabies. But while there'll be, I think, quite a bit of continuity between the two teams, I think just being in an environment where we get to know them as well is probably what we felt was probably most beneficial for us and hopefully for Joseph and the team.
Will you consider him for selection for England, or is that too early?
We tend to consider everyone for selection when we first get them in a squad. We've got 34 players in that squad, so of those there are four kind of five new faces, so that they'll all come into contention for that first test and all the way through. So, you know, what we've tended to do is probably not play them in the first test, to have a week with them first and then build them in like we did with Marika when he was in there and Brandon Paingamosa, those sort of guys who come in later. But you know, I guess we get a bit of time here. We get maybe 3 trainings here and then a couple of trainings over there. So and you know, we've got a few guys still recovering from the Rugby Championship, so it will depend on that mix.
Is there a chance that he plays in the Australia 15 instead for his first game, or like, is that possible, or you see that will start in the Wallabies?
It's possible, but it's probably more likely that he'll start or come off the bench in a Wallaby fixture, just because while we're in the same part of the world, we're still quite separate. You know, with the Australian 15 going to Bristol and then back to London, we'll be in London going across to Wales. So, you know, we may pass, but we won't be in the close proximity that would allow someone to dip in and out of an environment.
And what attributes do you think he has that makes you feel he's ready to take that big step?
Well, we're not sure he's ready, but the best way to find that out is to have him in camp and to get to know him a bit further, even though we've only had 2 trainings with him. But I've seen enough of him play as a rugby league player in the midfield there, and have got really good feedback from other players about him when he was in the school system, the under-18 system. A lot of the players that he played with, the likes of Angus Bell, Josh Fluke, those guys, you know, they speak highly of him as well. So, you know, I'm getting to know him, the coaches are getting to know him, and that'll be a process maybe that might take a couple of weeks, but at least we give ourselves a chance of finding out a little bit about him.
Can I just ask, was there any pressure to select him in the Wallabies externally on you at all?
No.
What position do you see him at?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we're not absolutely sure ourselves. I know that at school he played fullback and wing, and in the centres. I think he played wing for the Australian under-18s when I think Josh Fluke might have been the captain of that team. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of flexibility around where he best fits in as well.
It's quite a unique situation. I'm sure you haven't experienced before, but a huge money deal coming across. You're going to spend a fair bit of time, I guess, introducing him to rugby while also managing the whole campaign.
Yeah, but it's like that with any player, I think. You know, we've got guys who haven't had a lot of time with us. Obviously, Tane Edmed and Harry Potter are new in, and so we'll be investing time in them as well, because for us, you know, we don't so much pay them, we just play them and try to get the best performances out of them. So, you know, I've had discussions for probably 6 months with Will Skelton, just around how he's going, how he feels about being part of the team, and he's very keen and has been keen for a while, and this is an opportunity to get Will back in the group. Now, he's been in the group and is well respected anyway, and so is Samu, and those guys bring an experience to what is still a fairly raw group in terms of international experience. 16 debutants so far this year, and they're now split between the Australian 15 and the Wallaby 15, or the Wallaby squad. So with Joseph, I don't think it'll be too much different. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't conscious of the big deal that he's on, and the profile that he has, because you can't not be aware of that. But what our responsibility is to try to help him become the best rugby player and contributor to the team that he can be.
On the expectations, externally the expectations are quite high, but as his coach, realistically, what do you actually want to see him achieve on this tour?
Yeah, I just love him to blend in and be able to play in one of those positions, either centre, wing or fullback, and to kind of find his feet as quickly as possible. There are real differences. I was involved with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, outstanding rugby league player, very high profile player when he went across to the Blues and then into the All Blacks, and the collision area was no problem for him, but just post collision, some of those things that are very different around the ruck in rugby league versus around the ruck in rugby union. So those aspects, we'd just like to fast track as much of that as we can in training and in any game time that he may get.
Joe, does the fact that Joseph has a rugby education, if you'll pardon the pun, at King's, does that allow you to fast track him even more?
I think it does, you don't suddenly lose that. And one of the things that gave us real confidence in the hub was how rugby reactionally was around the collision area. Very, very good, very quickly, in what we were looking for, even though we weren't doing full contact. And his application, he is very intentional about how he learns and what he delivers. So those things gave us a bit of confidence to where we've ended up now with him being selected in the Wallaby squad.
Joe, it sounds like you're very confident he will debut on this tour. This isn't like a fact-finding mission for him or just get experience. It sounds like you're extremely confident, or very confident he will play at Test match.
I'd like to think that will be the case, because if he doesn't, and part of it, as much as we think maybe it might have been better to come through with Saibi, part of it is that we play the Lions next. So if he doesn't debut on this tour, then there's very little window. There may be one opportunity to play before the Lions next year, and that would be it. So for us, we feel a little bit of pressure to be able to fast track him and also to integrate those other guys as well. So we don't put guys in the squad to have them learn, certainly not for a full tour, maybe for a week or two, but would hope that there'd be some integration into some game time.
Joe, is there likely to be any resentment from players who've missed out on this squad, who've been playing rugby, all their lives, and Joseph's had a couple of training sessions and he's got in?
I think there's always been that mix in a Wallaby setup. There's been, you're going back to your Wendell Sailors and Lottie Takiris, your Matt Rogers, those sort of guys have always come in, and I think as long as there's an acceptance that they're going to add value and they're working hard to add value, everyone's competitive and they know you're talking about international footy, so it's competitive, and that if someone is squeezed out, some of the guys, who are with Saibi for this next couple of weeks, they're there because they didn't get a lot of game time, and we're trying to balance for some guys an opportunity to get some game time, because when there were guys who were in our squad for the Bledisloe Cup games and never got game time, and the longer that goes, the more out of sync you can get, because there's nothing prepares you for Test match footy than high level games. And so whether that's Super Rugby leading into Test matches or I think the Saxons game, you don't get a much better game to prepare someone for the next step to Test level, because having watched plenty of Wolfhounds kind of Ireland A versus Saxons games where it's England A, I've seen kids like Atoje come through that pathway, and I remember watching him in Cork as a young kid come through and think, wow, he's got a bit of special talent, and I think he's proven that over a number of years of top level performance.
Joe, you mentioned some of the guys that have made the switch across the rugby union in the past. Obviously, it's always generated a lot of interest. Hamish McLennan, who brought Joseph across to rugby on this deal, was speaking on the weekend, was quoted saying that the game needs to continue to look to do that, and said that Australia should throw everything that it can at Nathan Cleary. Has that thought ever popped into your head?
No, it doesn't. I've met Ivan a few times. I've never met Nathan. Ivan was obviously coach of the Warriors in New Zealand, and at the time I was coaching with the Blues. We did a couple of just pre-season events together. One of them was a beach rescue, and some of us definitely needed saving. So I think from that perspective, we feel Noah's making progress, and his confidence is growing. Tom Liner, really, he's one of the guys who didn't get game time. He's had that recurring, just that hamstring niggle that we're hoping is over now, and so we want to try to get him into some game time with the Australian 15, and then Tane's had a good NPC. Dan Halangahu, who's a top man and a very smart coach, has been keeping an eye on and giving me feedback. I've been watching some things around Tane, so it's just good for us to get a contact point with him, and we've got Ben Donaldson there. Now, I watched the final and watched Nathan Cleary look pretty good in it as well, so I'm not saying that I don't fully respect him as a generic footy player, whether that's league or union.
What do you think of the whole pursuit of NRL players, or even as casting the net across different codes here in Australia?
It's something that's not totally foreign to me, particularly in Ireland, with the Gaelic footballers, the likes of a guy like Rob Kearney or Robbie Henshaw, those very good Gaelic players who opted into rugby. I think, I'd like to think that we look fairly broadly, but at the same time, we want to invest in people who are investing in the game, and that's been part of why we've picked domestically so far, apart from Marika coming in to add some confidence and experience. And it's not just bringing in players, it's bringing in experience and helping those players, helping other players grow. We've got very young locks, for example. When you put Jeremy Williams in there and you put Nick Frost in there, they're very young in the game. So having the experience of someone like Will Skelton come in, same in the midfield, it will be probably, if Joseph is at fullback or wing or centre, someone like Samu Kerevi, his experience, 49 caps, he's ideal to help grow the players around them. So it's not just for their expertise and what they bring as an individual player, but what they can add to the squad.
Joe, where is Samu at fitness-wise, and do you know how long you'll have he and Will Skelton for through the tour?
Yeah, my expectation is the first 3 matches because that's the international window. I've had a number of discussions with Samu, so he's pretty fit and ready to go. He didn't feel like he was earlier in the year when Marika came in, but I spoke to Greg Laidlaw. I know Greg well, and he said he's probably fitter than he was all last year, and that's a positive starting point.
Just on Will, is he committed for the Lions tour next year? And did it take much convincing to get him away to play?
Yeah, he's keen as mustard. He doesn't take any convincing to play for the Wallabies. That's been my impression from the very first time I spoke to him, and the very first time he made contact. He's he's a really positive character, and he has a gravitas in the group. Obviously, he was captain last year and got injured, and I watched this game Monday morning, La Rochelle Bordeaux game. Played 60 minutes in that, and had a couple of great involvements. So I clipped a couple and sent them over to him just to keep him positive. So those conversations have been going on for a while. We haven't talked about the Lions, to be honest. I think we've always said, with the players particularly, we're short-term focused. As a coaching group, we're long-term planners. So I know that's paradoxical, but it's kind of the way coaches always are, because we have to be. So it's one of those things where if we didn't get Will and Samu involved in this window, I think it would be very difficult to have them involved for the Lions. So this is part of an investment for that, but it's part of an investment right now in the squad we've got and the growth we think those two guys can bring to the other guys in the squad.
Joe, there was some suggestion that there were some players who, perhaps in the second tier, who might not want to have been called up because it impacts their opportunities overseas. Did you come across any players at all who declined your invitation?
Not yet. There's always still a risk of that. I think I've explained in the past, I don't actually ring the players who get in, I ring the players who don't get in, as a rule. There's a lot of capped players in that Australian 15 with Sabi, so I think on the back of that, there's not too many who will question whether it's the right thing for their career. They were involved in the hubs recently last week, and they all were very enthusiastic about being involved in the hub. And I guess it's different if they are selected in the Wallabies versus the Australian 15, but they know they're on the radar. They know that they're not far away if they're in the Australian 15. So, I'd hope that they'd all take the challenge and pursue the starting spots that are available in the Australian 15 and pursue beyond that a Wallaby jersey.
Last couple for Joe, please, guys.
Mentioned Rico. Why is he missed out? What is the big job?
He's just having a break, to be honest. He probably felt he wasn't at the very top of his game, and he was a little bit flat after the season that he'd had. He's required to be back and training with Panasonic reasonably soon, so he's going to get a break and then he'll head back. And he's not a player that we own, and that's one of the flexibilities that you need to have with these guys. It's the flexibility that we've tried to have with Samu and Will as well, and it's also part of our policy to try to grow our local players. In the absence of Marika, I thought Dylan Peach was super in that last test in Wellington. He did a great job on both sides of the ball. It's about trying to build confidence in our players. His association with Marika over that period of time, it's that almost by osmosis, you're growing other players through the experienced players coming in and giving confidence, and I think Peachy really grabbed the opportunity against the All Blacks in that test in Wellington.
Do you think Marika will be back in a Wallabies jersey?
Well, again, no discussions that will probably take place kind of April next year, probably March, April next year. See how he's going. I watch his Panasonic games, so I know Robbie Deans well enough to have a chat with Robbie as well, and see how he's tracking. So, at the same time, we've got some young wingers starting to come through and put some pressure on, and we'd love them to come through and put enough pressure on where Marika feels that pressure, and it becomes a really tough decision for us, because as much as selecting any squad it's an unpleasant time for coaches, because it's not about the opportunity you offer to someone. It's very much of the 32 phone calls that I've made, it's very much around those guys who haven't quite made the Wallaby squad and are very close. And those decisions, like the matches themselves, sometimes there's very little between a decision that a guy gets in or he doesn't, or a bounce of the ball in the first 3 minutes in Wellington where we almost score but we don't. It's some of them are very tight decisions that as a coach and as a team of coaches, there's ebb and flow in those conversations that where you start with in your squad is seldom where you finish with your squad. So I'd like to think those players will see themselves as being right in the frame, and that will inspire them to stay with the program.
Anything for Rod, please?
I could just ask one or both of you, is there any crossover between these tours? Like, you going to train together, will Wallabies players be used for the Australia 15 teams at all?
We won't really get the chance, as I said, to train together, but there may be, or if we pick up injury, for example, we will definitely be looking at Rob Sybie of some of his players, and we've talked about who and maybe how that might happen in terms of injury. I don't know, Sybie.
Well, I mean, essentially that's what we're there for. We're there to add depth. So obviously with form and injury, there'd be some players who'd be targeting, some good performances there in those first two games, and then if the opportunity comes up, then they bounce across. But obviously, contact sport that we play, there's always going to be movement.
In the past, I think the success of that A team was that they basically trained with the same attacking shapes and calls and all the same. That's sort of the idea with this as well, so that they can be seamlessly.
Yeah, no, that's it. We've been fortunate here to come away for this couple of hubs, so we can, as coaches, pick up the language. We're speaking the same sort of vocab. Players are aware of the fundamentals that the Wallaby coaches are concerned with. So obviously we're there to win 2 games, but the reality is we want a seamless transition when they go from the 15 into the Wallabies team. So very much so. Yeah.
For either of you, young Massimo turning some heads with his power and upside as a prop. What are you seeing as potential overview?
Yeah. Well, we've been talking to Massimo. He's another one of Chrono's adopted sons, really. He adopts anything that eats raw meat, I think. And so Massimo, he's an impressive young character, not just as a player. He's very driven, and we're pretty excited about his future. I think sometimes, particularly with a tight head prop, you can't get too excited too early, just because you want to make sure they're ready for the kind of struggle that is front row at the very top level. But geez, he's a good young kid. So I think for Zane Hilton, with he knows him well as well. So with Zane being part of Sybie's coaching group, I think there's a little bit of continuity for Massimo. Mike Cron's had a number of sessions with him when we trained in Brisbane before the start of TRC. Massimo came in and was on the periphery of a few of those sessions, particularly the front row sessions. So we haven't seen a whole lot of games from him, but we're excited about kind of him getting closer to the top level.
Can I just ask one more about Harry Potter and what you saw in and where he's kind of come from in your estimation as the third player who hasn't been capped in that team?
Yeah, I mean we earmarked Harry probably around the middle of the Super Rugby last year, and I remember I think I was at a Brumbies game with Laurie Fisher, and we both thought Harry was really good on the day. He shone on the day, and he picked up an injury on the back of that. That very involvement, I think, the very next game, and was out for a fair period of time. I watched his involvements in Bloemfontein with the Force, having played over there recently in the Toyota Cup, and felt that he was back in the groove, and B, bit of versatility. He played 13 as well as on the wing, and so it's an opportunity for us to bring him into the squad and to get to know him a little bit.
Rod, any further for Rod?
Do the Wallabies that you've got, do they have the inside running for selection, or is this all up to training and form?
But it'll be up to training and form, really. Yeah, no, we don't look to necessarily see who's played Wallabies before. I mean, the reality is in this sort of team, you've got people all on their own pathway. So you got your Massimos, who's first sort of open national team. So he's looking to for the experience, and then you've got blokes like Lockie Lonergan who coming back from a long-term injury and looking to work their way back into the Wallabies. So from when you look across the squad, they're all hungry and they all want to work their way into the Wallabies, but they're coming from so different backgrounds, and I certainly don't want to put the fact that they don't have a cap against their name against them.
Joe, did Harry Wilson carry on?
Sorry guys, I'm going to have to shift it after this if there's anything further for Rod. One last question for Joe if there is one, because we do have a few things to get to.
Just Harry Wilson, does he carry on, and did Liam Wright suffer a setback with his shoulder that he looked last week?
Yeah, Liam is still suffering with that shoulder. We're not quite sure where it is at the moment, but we know he's not ready to tour, and hopefully that's a temporary setback, but that's something that will come out in the wash further along the line. He was due to be in the hub and training, so it's very recent. So that's massively disappointing for Liam. Even when he wasn't part of the squad, he was still we were still using him to send messages to players around. He's such a good preparer of himself to keep influencing others positively in the squad, because he is a really good leader. At the same time, Harry's done a really good job. So we've got a few in the leadership group, of which Harry is one now, and I'd say it's not something that we've actually talked about yet. So I think Harry would definitely be one of the standout characters who's likely to be involved in leadership of the team in some way, shape or form. Whether that's captain, we're not sure, because we haven't really discussed it. We've only really... We take so long to make our decisions around the team in the first place, the squads, because as Saibi said, they're coming from so many different perspectives, and it's quite disparate when we're looking at where they've come from and trying to build the best continuity for us, but also then grow the group as best we can. So Harry would be one of the standouts that would certainly be in the mix.